Recognize the back. These two fine people sitting with them. As you know,
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 5th Congressional District Democratic Nominee Candidate Forum. This event is brought to you by Businesses of Rappahannock and by Rappahannock News. I'm Teresa Wood, the president of Businesses of Rappahannock. I want to thank all of you for coming out today. I know there are a lot of wonderful opportunities on a beautiful day in Rappahannock County, as well as a very important march that's taking place in Washington, D.C. and across the country. So we appreciate you coming out to hear what these fine candidates have to say today. This is important information. It's going to help us all make informed decisions. So thank you. This event happens because there are a lot of volunteers and support from local businesses. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take just one moment to thank a few of these folks. First and foremost, we'd like to thank Rappahannock News, particularly Dennis Brack and John McCaslin, because without them, we cannot bring you the news, nor can we bring you an event of this caliber. Their insights have been invaluable. Secondly, we would also like to thank the Board of Directors for Businesses of Rappahannock. These 6 members volunteer endless hours to help sustain business in Rappahannock County. Yay! Thank you. So our members are Jan Makala, she's the Vice President. Bernie Olson, Secretary. Treasurer is Melissa Schooler. And then we have Toby Wheelock, Robert Archer, and Sheila Whaley. They are all members of the Village Representation Team. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to thank Dick and Nancy Raines for allowing us to use this facility today for this important meeting. Thank you. A couple of quick reminders about the forum. Please hold all applause, except now, until the end of the forum. Also, please hold all your questions and comments until the moderator calls for audience participation. And finally, please do silence your cell phones. Some actually do work in Washington, Virginia. Okay. There have been a couple of changes to today's program. The most obvious is Tom Oliphant could not be with us today. He had to go to Mississippi for a funeral. So, John Fox Sullivan, the mayor of Washington, has graciously agreed to step in and take Tom's place. Mr. Sullivan has nearly 40 years' experience in magazine publishing. He was with Newsweek from 1970 to 1975, and from 1975 to 2012, he was the president and publisher of National Journal, The Hotline, and other Inside the Beltway publications. In addition, he was the president and publisher of The Atlantic from 1997 to 2012. Mr. Sullivan has a home in Rappahannock County where he's lived since 1986. He was elected mayor of Washington in 2010 and still holds that position today. Mayor Sullivan has moderated several debates, including 2 for the county sheriff's department county sheriff's position, and the board of supervisors in Rappahannock County. When asked for a description of himself, Mr. Sullivan jokingly said, "A fabulous human being with a great wife and nice children and dogs, particularly dogs." I couldn't agree more with John. He and his wife Beverly are fabulous human beings. They love Rappahannock County and they are endless supporters of the businesses and nonprofits here. So, without further ado, please welcome our fabulous moderator, Mayor John Fox Sullivan.
Hello. Thank you. An apology up front. I lost my voice in the last 24 hours, so it will work, but it might be creaky. Different levels. Thank you, Teresa, for setting this up, McCaz, and all the rest of you. I really appreciate it. The format is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to ask each of the candidates to talk for an opening talk. Then I'm going to ask questions. And most cases will be the same question for each candidate. Sometimes it may be just a specific question to a specific candidate. I'm going to hold the right to follow up to any of them. Please no applause, as Teresa said, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. I really like that. We are missing one candidate temporarily, and that's R.D. Huffstetler is going to arrive any minute. And Andrew Sneetham is not able to attend because he went to one of the marches. Now, it turns out all the other 3 candidates went to the marches today, but Mr. Sneetham will not be here. R.D. will show up at any moment. I'm going to ask you to indulge me. I'm going to call them by the first name. I'm not going to be fancy and say Mr. this and Ms. that and confuse the names and all that stuff. Not in Rappahannock. How many of you know that James Madison was the first member of Congress in this district? You How many of you know the last Democratic president to win this district was Harry Truman? Henry, okay. I got my stars here. I'm going to set this up with just a little bit of data for a second. Actually, no, I'm not. Why don't you come on out? Let me introduce the 2 candidates that are here. Leslie Cockburn, ladies first, if that's acceptable. Ladies first. Candidate A first. Then Cobb, candidate B. Let me just add, in the sake of transparency, everybody wants transparency in this world. I've known Leslie for 25 or 30 years, and I have not known the other candidates other than to have heard them on occasion. This district, just a couple of quick facts. Many of them you know. Robert Hurt won this congressional district 60-40 against the Democrats. Garrett won it 58-42 against the Democrats. Trump won it by similar margins. You can go back to 2012. Any way you want to cut it, it's pretty much of a 60-40 district in terms of voting. 725,000 people in the district. It's larger than New Jersey and Vermont, as many of you know. It's so crazily drawn. With that, let's me shut up and let's get you guys talking. Leslie, would you like to start off? You've won the draw to start off.
Absolutely.
You got the two best candidates, right?
Yeah. Do you want us to go up to the lectern to do this?
Why don't you?
Okay.
Or whatever you're most comfortable with. But...
Okay. Well, as most of you know, I'm from Rappahannock County. So Andrew, who I think has arrived, we were just at the march in Washington, and which was spectacular, by the way. There were hundreds of thousands of people there, and it felt to me like the first Women's March. So it was very exciting to be there. So Andrew and I have been in Rappahannock County for 19 years. We moved from Washington, as did many people. It was really the smartest thing we've ever done, I think. I love this county very deeply, and interestingly enough, the experience of running for Congress has allowed me to get to know this truly extraordinary district. And I have put over 40,000 miles on the car doing this now, because it does go all the way down to the North Carolina border. But I have found, although people have endlessly told me, North side is different from South side, we're not the same, it's not true. That we have 21 rural counties in the district, and many of these counties have exactly the same problems and issues and desires as Rappahannock County. And that's a very good thing in terms of the election. And as for those depressing numbers of Democrats not winning, let me tell you that a close look, my background is 35 years of investigative journalism. I was a 60 Minutes producer and a frontline correspondent, written books, etc. So of course, I looked very closely at the numbers in the van, and you see that there are about 4,000 more committed Democrats than Republicans. You can see this. You can see who's volunteering. You can see who's voting in primaries. What this means is that the way to win this is get out the vote, rather than becoming a small R Republicans. I was with a woman the other night in Henry County who is working with our campaign. She said, "I hate those Republicrats. I hate them." So there is a sense of have policies, have ideas that really get people out to vote, and that's the way to go. So why am I running? The last time I was up on this stage was a little over a year ago, and I was giving a talk on fake news. And I think that the terrible effect of the Trump administration on me has been to propel me out of my normal life, out of my normal social life, out of my normal professional life, and put me on this campaign trail. And I must say, one way not to get depressed about Donald Trump is to campaign like this, because you have no time to be depressed, and you realize you are doing something. And we have now built an army in this district. We have over 500 volunteers. We have a fantastic campaign staff. And I think that we can really beat Tom Garrett. Tom Garrett not only annoys everyone in this room, but his office is closed to some very surprising people. The Cattlemen's Association, for example. I went to them, we were talking about cows, and I said, "So when was the last time you talked to Tom Garrett?" And they said, "We do not talk to Tom Garrett. We are not welcome in his office. He does not care about cattle, and he doesn't care about agriculture." I thought that was very telling, that this person is not representing us. You can do an endless video of voices from all over this district saying, "He is not representing me." And I think that that is where we win. So with my background of, I have an excellent background for taking on someone like Tom Garrett. When he starts talking about the Iran deal or, now that we have John Bolton in the White House, we're going to have war with Iran, North Korea, it's very easy to really take him on. And that's what we have to do. So thank you for being here.
Are they, you hear it? Oh, okay. He'll be out here in a second. Ben?
My name is Ben Cullop. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very, very excited to be here. We've been, the four of us have been traveling around the district for the past number of months, and Leslie very favorably represents your county as we travel around. I've learned a few things about Rappahannock County. I've learned there are more cows than people, so I'm fact-checking this stuff right now. I've learned that there are no stoplights. And so it's been fun to learn about Rappahannock by spending so much time with Leslie. I was born in the 5th District of Virginia. I was born in Charlottesville. I was raised in Virginia, and now I'm raising my family here. I live in a little town called Earlysville in northwest Albemarle County. Live there with my wife, Ashley, and we have 2 young children. We've got a 4-year-old little girl. She turns 4 next month, and we've got an 8-month-old little boy named Thomas. We adopted Thomas from Fort Worth, Texas last end of July of last year. And so Ashley and I like to joke that we are slowly taking Texas Republicans and turning them into Virginia Democrats, which we're very proud of. So I'm in this race particularly because this is my home. The people that we see as we travel around this district, they're my friends, they're my relatives, they're my neighbors, they're the people that I've grown up with. And so when I see them struggling to get a good job or find affordable health care or find a good school for their children, that's personal for me. And as we all know, we can do so much better than we are right now. We can do better than Tom Garrett, we can do better than Donald Trump, and we can do better than the failed policies and rhetoric coming out of Washington. The third big reason I'm in this race, to be honest with you, is corporate money in politics and the big influence that the biggest corporations have on politicians in Washington. We wonder why we can't solve some of the big problems in our democracy, like gun control or the fact that drug prices are so high. Well, I think we can if we get big corporate money out of politics. I think we can solve the issues of gun reform if we get the gun manufacturers' money out of politics. I think we can solve the fact that prescription drugs are so high if we get big pharma money out of politics. The last thing that we're doing in this campaign is that we are engaging an entirely new generation of people in politics. You're all looking at me and wondering how old I am. I'm 35 years old. We are going to high schools, we are going to colleges, and we are getting people involved in politics who've never been involved before. These are not Republicans that we're convincing to be Democrats. These are people who are not voting and who are not engaged in our political system. And if we as Democrats are going to be a big tent party, we have to have candidates and policies that the next generation of people can get excited about. So, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm excited to be here with you guys. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. And with that, I turn the floor back over to Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Ben. Now,
Hey Rappahannock, how we doing today? Thank you for being patient with me. I apologize. I was at the gun violence rally in Charlottesville, and Marines are never late, so I'm not sure what happened today. But how does it feel to be in the greatest state in the union, to be a Democrat, everybody? Yeah, come on. We sent a great governor to Richmond. We sent a great lieutenant governor and sent our attorney general back, and we contested great districts all up and down the 5th and sent great nominees out, and we're really proud of that, and that's exactly what we're going to do again. I want to echo what Ben said. Leslie is a great ambassador for your area here, and she's extremely proud to be from this area. And you know why? Because it is so beautiful. This is our favorite drive for me, and Leslie gets to leave here every drive, so I know she has a scenic view on her rides too. My name is Roger Dean Huffstetler. I was born in North Carolina, and I grew up in Georgia. As a Marine veteran and a person who worked in technology, I lived all over. And when my wife Emily and I were ready to start a child, we decided, start a family. We have a 6-week-old baby, so that is, exactly. We decided to move to the best place in the world to do that. And we live down in Charlottesville. My wife's an OBGYN at the Martha Jefferson Hospital down there. And we couldn't be prouder of the area that we live in. We think it's a great place to be. I'm running for Congress because DC is completely broken. And Tom Garrett is the poster child for that dysfunction. Now, Tom Garrett is part of the House Freedom Caucus there. And if you don't know who that is, it's the 25 people in D.C. who think they know better than us. They continue to put their ideology in front of the ideas to make the world better. They put the House Freedom Caucus in front of our country, and they put themselves, their special interests in front of us. And we really got to step up and make sure this is their last election cycle where they have the grip on the power here in our country. And we're really determined to make sure that Tom Garrett is a one-term congressman. I want to tell you the 3 reasons that I think with your help, I can be the candidate to beat Tom Garrett this fall. The first is that I'm actually the first in my family to graduate from college. My dad grew up on a farm in Lincoln County, North Carolina. He drove a forklift for Ford for 30 years. And I got to use the GI Bill and the Hope Scholarship to go to undergraduate and then graduate school. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of being able to use programs that the Democratic Party championed to make me to be the first in my family to graduate from college. The second reason I think I can be the candidate to beat Tom Garrett this fall is I'm a Marine veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq. After 9/11, I just really wanted to do my part, and I decided to enlist in the Marine Corps. The best part about the Marine Corps is you get out of bed every day, and you got a mission to get accomplished. You don't care if the person next to you is from a big city or a small state, if they're a Republican or a Democrat, what their parents do. There's a mission to get done, and the mission must come first. I think that if we can expect that of the 18-year-olds protecting our way of life right now, we can dang sure expect that out of our congressman. The third reason I think I can be the candidate to beat Tom Garrett this fall is I was really fortunate to use the GI Bill to go to the Harvard Business School and then work in technology. I learned about things called distributed computing and how to manage teams of engineers. And we need that type of thinking all throughout the 5th District and in our federal government right now, so we can make it more efficient and effective. So just because DC is broken doesn't mean America is. And I believe that because that has been my life story. The Huffstetlers were not supposed to graduate from college, but I got to use the Hope Scholarship to go to undergraduate. And the Huffstetlers weren't necessarily supposed to go to Harvard, but I got to use the GI Bill, a program created by a great Democratic president, FDR, and updated by a great Virginia Democrat, Jim Webb. And that's the kind of program you can expect me to champion if I'm your next congressman. So thanks for having me here, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, R.D.
You want us to stay seated and pass the microphone, or do you want us to each stand up to answer?
What is easier? What's more comfortable for you all?
Stay seated rather than.
Want to do that?
I'm fine with whatever.
Yeah.
Can you move the lectern in? It blocks.
We can't do that because it's a wire.
Oh, all right.
Oh.
Well, then we'll
Okay, just-
My first.
You are
I'm
first.
I'm here for the meetings.
You're here first. What are your top 2 issues? Not 5, not 6, not a laundry list, if I may say so. What are the 2 things you most care about?
2 most important issues in this campaign are healthcare and jobs. Healthcare is the first thing out of people's mouths as we travel around the district. We are everywhere we go, we are asking people questions, right? I feel like one of the things that people in politics do too much is lead with their mouths and not with their ears. There's the old saying that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should use them in that proportion. And in politics, I feel like it's often the opposite. So we've been traveling around trying to listen. On healthcare, my story, so you guys know, is much more personal than it is partisan. Our daughter, Elizabeth, was born severely premature. She was born 3 months early, spent the first 2 months of her life in the UVA hospital. Night that she was born, doctors told Ashley and I that she may not make it through her first 72 hours of life. Now, thanks to the good doctors and nurses at UVA's hospital, she's, happy and healthy 4-year-old little girl. But we got the statement of charges for her stay in the hospital, and it was north of $500,000. That's absolutely devastating for a family. We were fortunate because we were both working and had insurance, but it should not take good fortune to be healthy in America. So, I support Tim Kaine's Medicare X proposal, which puts a public option onto the already existing Affordable Care Act exchanges. And then we're also talking a lot about jobs. People across the district, you read a lot about how the unemployment rate nationally is low, right? 4%. That's not the case in every county in the 5th District of Virginia. We've got unemployment rates in the high single digits, the low double digits, underemployment rates even higher than that. So as we travel around, absolutely, people want to know, how are we going to create jobs? And what are we going to do about that issue? And then briefly, I'll give you 10 seconds on that. The history of this district in terms of jobs is a history of monopolization and consolidation and concentration. Big companies, sort of being in charge of their local communities. Danville, for example, had a company called Dan River Mills that employed 17,000 people at one point. Now it employs 0. They used to make bed sheets and towels, and turns out it's pretty easy to make those in Malaysia or Vietnam and fold them up pretty small and ship them on a 53-foot container across the Pacific Ocean. So the future of the economy, in my mind, in this district is much more small, medium-sized businesses spread out across the district, across a wide variety of industries. So being responsive to healthcare and jobs can be two of the most important things that your next congressperson is going to do.
Thank you. R.D., you know the question.
Yes, sir. I feel like we're going to win this campaign when next November somebody points at us and says, there goes that guy that won't stop talking about jobs. So I think that jobs is the most important issue throughout the 5th District. I've witnessed this in different geographies as we go around and listen. I have a mentor, Joe Lassiter. He's an environmental professor, and he's from Arkansas. He has a great Southern accent. And I said, Joe, tell me what's going on with the economy right now. And he said, well, Roger Dean, the economy can't just be Uber drivers and college professors. We got to have something in the middle, son. And I think that is the best summary I've heard of the economy right now. We have a bunch of service workers who are working extremely hard. They have not had an increase in the minimum wage since 2009. And then we have a lot of high-skilled workers in our economy as well. An economist calls this the middle skills gap. And what we're trying to do in my campaign is try to fix that problem here in the 5th District. We've divided the 5th District into 5 regions. We're in Region 1 right now. Everything north of here is in Region 1. It's going to include a lot of ecotourism, obviously, here. And as we go north into Fauquier County, of course, you're going to have a lot of folks that are commuting, either to Nova or to D.C. And so we got to work on some different issues up that part, traffic and things like that. But what we try to do in our economic development plan is properly align the research institutions, the community colleges, and the private sector leadership so that we can fix this middle skills gap. And let me give you an example from our district. Down in Danville, the high school there has working with Danville Community College. And they actually pull that first year of community college into the high school. And so someone can do that and then go 1 year of community college. They're going to go right into the economy, making $65,000 to $70,000 a year working with their hands. It's exactly that kind of very localized and specialized thinking that we need throughout the 5th District that can help people get jobs right away. And I'll echo what Ben is saying. Tables, tobacco, and down south was really dominating the economy for a long time. And what that does is it atrophies our institutions. And now that's been whittled away over the last 30 years now. And what we've got to do is get back to the basics of making sure that when somebody gets a degree, they can get a job. One of the things that's great about the Piedmont Virginia Community College down in Charlottesville is they have a bunch of programs that are about 10 weeks long. So somebody shows up and they say, hey, I want to be working in a brewery in 10 weeks. They can do it. They can go work at a winery in 10 weeks. They have a hospitality program down there. So that's the kind of focused thinking that we need throughout the different regions in the 5th District. And, I often say the 5th District of Virginia was not necessarily drawn for a Democrat. As all of y'all know, it's a very challenging district. And I'll echo that by saying, a congressional district is not a natural unit for economic development. That's why we tried to partner in Region 4. There's a bunch of forestry there to try to figure that out. And then, of course, advanced manufacturing down in Danville. and ecotourism in other parts of the district as well. So the key insight to me about fixing the economy and why I think it's the most important issue of the campaign is that if you can have focused, localized thinking, people can get jobs much more readily through any of our regions. Healthcare is obviously another big issue. I've talked a lot about the economy. I don't want to go over time here, but healthcare actually has a big impact on the economy as well. They have studied entrepreneurship rates at age 64 and 65, and at age 65, people are much more likely to start a business. Well, why is that? Because they have healthcare, which is why we got to fight for quality, affordable healthcare in every zip code in this district, not just for the reasons of being Democrats, but also because it helps the economy. Thank you much.
Leslie.
Well, in spending a lot of time looking very closely at the district, I find that the two issues that are the biggest issues for me are healthcare by far. That's number one, the biggest issue for everyone here. And the second is the environment, and jobs gets wrapped into that, and I'll explain how. Healthcare, people are panicked and terrified that they are going to lose healthcare. Everyone has a pre-existing condition. Everyone has a relative who needs that Medicaid money for special education. Everyone has a parent or grandparent who is in a nursing home. 2/3 of that population are on Medicaid. So when Tom Garrett announced that he was pushing a bill, he signed a bill that would have taken healthcare away from 23 million people, I immediately went to clinics to see how people would be affected locally. So I went down to the Blue Ridge Clinic down in Nelson County. 1,600 children in that one clinic would have lost health care immediately, and 2,000 adults. So the devastation that would have been caused if that House bill had gone through, and if any iteration of that bill happens now, it's going to be really bad for this district. People are very conscious that when I mentioned that in this country now, 700,000 people a year go bankrupt from healthcare costs. In in all the other developed countries, that number is 0. And this is a big problem. Everything relates to healthcare. This is a very important point about healthcare in the district. I went to the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Pittsylvania County, which includes, Danville is in the middle of Pennsylvania. She told me that 2,000 jobs were open there. 2,000 jobs from highly skilled to working at McDonald's. They were not being filled. The biggest reason was people could not pass a drug test because the opioid plague is so devastating in our district, and it's up and down the district. I can't tell you how many people I have sat down with to talk about one county or another, and they are suddenly telling me that their daughter just OD'd on heroin, or this is happening every day. So you cannot think about employment without fixing the health piece of that, which is treatment. I went to a fantastic treatment center in Lynchburg the other day called Roads to Recovery, where it's all addicts in recovery who know that it doesn't just take 28 days. It could be 8 months. It could be you need their people to help you get jobs to re-enter the workforce, and you need housing, and you need a whole lifestyle change. So when you talk about healthcare, healthcare is a very big, powerful, and important piece of this. I am 100% for Medicare for all. I would sign the bill that's on the table right now in the House, which is now a Keith Ellison bill. It was a Conyers bill. 121 people have signed on to this. Medicare for all, which immediately takes care of older people's concerns about vision, hearing aids, you name it, all of that taken care of. I'm not going to be I'm at time, but believe me, healthcare is number one.
Here's where I get to use some discretion. Gentlemen, are you for total access to Medicare? Are you agree with your colleague here?
So let's talk a little bit about this public policy issue. I support Tim Kaine's plan for Medicare X, and I'd like to tell you why. First of all, Medicare X is fast. We can use the current exchanges to get the plans up there right away. The second reason it's really important to support Medicare X is because it does not trust the Medicare Trust Fund. I'm not sure that I just want everyone in America to have access to that. I want to think about that issue more, but I think the Medicare X plan gives us a fast way to fix the problem right now. We can put these plans on in communities where we have 1 or 0 providers, and we can use the existing framework of how we already reimburse Medicare doctors. Now, in healthcare, there's always a couple different variables. Medicare for All would, in fact, give everyone coverage, but there's 3 variables in healthcare we need to think about: coverage, access, and quality. So Medicare for All is not a magic wand where everybody has quality, affordable healthcare. It does give people coverage, which is an important thing that Democrats fight for, but we got to remember, if that's the only variable we try to focus on, we may run providers out. We may have the reimbursement rates so low that we don't have access to people in certain communities, or you could have a hospital that closes. So there's a lot of different variables in it, and from my perspective and things I've been studying, I don't think it's as simple as saying Medicare for All means everybody has a high-quality physician or a hospital near them. Look, as Democrats, we got to fight all the time to protect ACA. 20 million of our fellow Americans have coverage now. We got rid of pre-existing conditions. We got rid of lifetime caps. We got rid of gender rating, which meant that women paid more for their health insurance. That's a lot of progress. I want to keep fighting them, fighting for more and more coverage. And you'll notice that this administration is trying to roll back progress. They have ended the individual mandate, and they're trying to get rid of something called cost-sharing agreements. So as potentially as your next congressman, I'll fight to make sure those 2 things are in place, and we continue to shore up our progress under ACA.
Ben?
So I am for universal coverage, and the way to get there being a public option on the existing exchanges. What this does is it takes Medicare and puts it onto the Affordable Care Act exchanges, allows people that don't have access to health care through their job, or they can't afford it exist on the existing exchange, to be able to buy into Medicare at its cost. And one of the great pieces of this is that it preserves choice for Americans. Now, Americans love choice, right? We love choice in everything. Go look at how many different types of cereal there are to buy at the grocery store, how many different types of cars there are when you need to buy a new car. Americans value choice. It's a fundamental value, and that applies to healthcare. Now, there are a lot of people out there that say, well, Americans should value outcomes, right? They should value how quickly you get better from a particular illness or X, Y, or Z metric. We can have a conversation about that, but the fundamental thing to understand is that Americans still value choice in healthcare, and they still want to be able to decide for themselves how to have their health insurance administered. So I think the beautiful thing about the public option is that it gives people who aren't getting health insurance, aren't getting access to health care, a way to do it. But if you already are and you're happy with it, you can continue to do so. And to me, that's a really nice solution to a very tricky public policy question. Thank you.
Thank you. The 3 of you have heard each other 15, 20, 30 times, 50. You know what each other thinks, says, etc. Leslie, how do you differ? Pick an issue in which you really, there are some differences on health right there. Pick an issue in which you really differ with RD on, or Ben, take your pick, where you have a strong difference of opinion and an issue.
Well, I think we're quite different on healthcare, so that's for starters. But also, I have a background as a conservationist and environmentalist. I spent 10 years at the Piedmont Environmental Council fighting power lines, pipelines, uranium mining. These things are hugely important in this district. They bind the counties. We have 2 fracked gas pipelines that are threatening to come through. We have a congressman who has voted to dismantle the Environmental Protection Agency every way possible. We need clean air, we need clean water. Everyone knows that in Rappahannock. He voted to take away streams protection. I would want to restore that immediately so that we don't have coal ash in the streams down south. I think being a strong environmentalist makes me slightly different. I think we all, I'm not sure I would let others talk about their views of the pipelines, but I regard these pipelines as a disgrace. They are going through areas that, for example, Nelson County, which is a successful rural county because of tourism. They have cideries, breweries, wedding venues. The pipeline is going to cut right through that. So you're taking something that actually works, that's an organic way of building what the tourism and agritourism, which is the way to go in the 5th District, clearly. And you're spoiling it. You're going to, you're going to destroy these, some of these farms, and you're going to destroy whole communities. In Buckingham, there's a freedman community, an African-American community, historic community, where people, their ancestors first farmed there after slavery was abolished. And one of the pipelines is going to put an enormous compressor station right in the middle of this community, which will sound like 4 diesel locomotives 7 days a week and spew toxic chemicals. These pipelines, this hits a climate change issue. The pipelines are going to leak enough methane to be the equivalent of 46 coal-fired plants. 46 coal-fired plants, because methane is so much more powerful than CO2. So on issues of climate change, on issues of environment, I really put them up near the top of what I care about most, and would definitely want to get on natural resources. I think that, our biggest, what's the economy of the 5th District? It's agriculture, and then it's timber and tourism. We need to preserve what we have. Also, of course, the biggest jobs provider could be renewable energy, unquestionably. Solar projects. We need to knit together all the solar projects that already exist in this county. So I think the environmental issues sets me apart.
Now, if I were one of your 60-minute colleagues, I would probably say you didn't quite answer the question as to how you differ from your opponents here, but
In terms of emphasis.
yeah, okay. I'm having fun. We're supposed to have some fun here. Dan, how about you? Is there an issue in which you sit there and you say, Leslie or RD are just kind of full
You're pushing it, you're pushing it.
It's a chance to talk about issues.
Yeah, one of you asked earlier a great question to start with, which were what are the top 2 issues if you have to name 2. My third one is education. I care deeply and passionately about education. It's one of the things that drives me out of bed in the morning. I am the child of 2 public school teachers. I am a product of Virginia public schools. My first job out of college was for the Office of Undergraduate Admission at the University of Virginia. So I worked as an admission dean, traveling around recruiting students to come to Charlottesville for their education. I have seen the cash-strapped schools in Southside and the way they differ from the best magnet schools in Northern Virginia. And we have created a system where the zip code that a child is born into determines their educational and professional outcomes in life. And that's unacceptable to me. And I think that's unacceptable to all of us as Democrats. Now, I sort of bucket the question in 3 ways. The first is we've got to think about kids when they're small. We've got to think about pre-K. And we've got to think about expanding pre-K to all children. I believe the public school system should start much earlier than it does now. And we know from all available studies that putting children into school early has great outcomes for them later in life. They have higher paying jobs, they have more stable careers, they have more stable families. Also has incredible outcomes for society because these children who are in pre-K, they have lower rates of incarceration, they have lower rates of unemployment. So pre-K is a win-win for the individuals and for society, and so I think that makes it a no-brainer. The second thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we're modernizing our K through 12 system. We still have a K through 12 system that is educating people for an economy that has changed. And I don't blame the teachers and I don't blame the students. I believe that is a failure of the system. It is a failure of an underfunded school system. But we need to bring back our vocational trainings, bring back our career and technical education classes so that people can have the skills to get a job when they graduate from high school. Right now, if we are training students, we were just at an educational summit down in Danville a couple weeks ago, and it was the school systems in Southside talking about the way that they're doing career and technical education training. Right now, if you can fly a commercial drone, for example, like Amazon wants you to, you can make $70,000 a year. You're training in things like cybersecurity. We've all learned over the course of the past couple of years how important that is. It's things like nursing and healthcare. Those are the career and technical education classes we need back in our high schools. And the last thing is that we need to make sure that higher education is affordable. Whether or not that is a 2-year degree, a vocational certificate, or a 4-year degree, we need to make sure that higher education is affordable for those that want it. So education is one of those things, again, it's kind of an emphasis question as we've been discussing, that I think has got to be a key piece of any congressperson from this district's platform and major point of emphasis once they're actually elected.
R.D.
I mean, yes, there are some policy differences between the Democrats running here. We talked a little bit about health care. I think we all want the same outcome. We have a little bit of disagreement on how to get there. I think with other things, it's slight nuances, things that we believe differently. President Johnson said, the purpose of leadership is to prevent irreconcilable differences. And one of the things I try to do in this job is make sure that before I open my mouth on an issue, I listen to both sides. I want to hear what folks in the party are thinking, maybe who are maybe in the middle, but also the left wing of our party. And I want to try to put forward plans that are comprehensive and get things done in politics. I think if you look at our website under From RD, you'll see the most comprehensive response to the opioid crisis, to the energy issue here in our district, and also to gun violence. And what I try to do is put together plans that will work, plans that we can get through the Congress to make a difference in people's lives. We have extensive views on how what role the Congress should have, what bills we can sponsor, the levers of government that we can move. And I will tell you that that type of thinking has been rewarded in this process, and I'm really proud of that. And I want to talk specifically about gun violence. My dad was an NRA member. And when all this stuff started happening in our schools, which of course has been happening for decades, but it's really come to a head now, I wanted to write him a letter. And I wanted to explain to him how things have changed since he was an NRA member. He passed away many years ago, 17 years ago. And I said, hey, I talked to Uncle Bill, who served in Vietnam, who's a Republican, and he thinks we ought to ban these weapons of war. And I talked to my cousin, Franklin, who teaches high school down in North Carolina. He's also a Republican, and he thinks we ought to ban these weapons of war too. And so we came up with a comprehensive set of steps to reduce gun violence in our country. And you can see it on my website, but we basically call for the repeal of the Dickey Amendment, which prevents the federal government from studying gun violence. We call for gun violence restraining orders, which can help a woman feel safe in her home so a judge can take a weapon out for a temporary period of time. So you get the point. We try to think hard about what are the things we can actually do for the people to make their life better. And I'm really proud that this week that we announced that Gabby Givers endorsed my campaign. And the reason she endorsed my campaign was because of the letter I wrote my dad. And I'm really proud of that because that's the kind of person I want to be in public service. The kind of person who is thoughtful, the kind of person who will listen to both sides and try to bring people together to make differences in people's lives. And that's what we focus on my campaign, what we can actually do with the office of congressman. What is it that we would be doing day to day? And I've said many times in many different zip codes, the first person I want to hire to my team is a director of economic development because I think that's the best way for me to make a difference in people's lives. It's not a knock on the other candidates, it's just I wanted to mention that one of the things that I do is I try really, really hard to focus on how would I think and process about these issues and how would I explain this to anybody here in the 5th District. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. I want to change the pace here. We've done a lot of issue talk. I want to talk mathematics. We're putting it differently, campaign strategy. We're putting it in a larger context. Who the hell are you? If my numbers are right, the Republicans have beaten the Democrats in this congressional district by about 50,000 votes the last 3 elections. Now, it was a big lift in presidential years, a bigger turnout. And we're not in a presidential year, obviously. But nevertheless, each of the last three races, it's about 50,000 difference. So the question is, how do you make up that difference? And I really would love to get in your strategy if you're willing to share that information. You know, one way is to drive up turnout amongst Democrats by some percent. Another would be to have more women, be they Republicans or Democrats, turn them out or have Republicans. One might be have Republicans come to you. You talked about Republicrats. You didn't want to be one. How do you know, you're all adults. You guys sit there. You've got your numbers. How do you think you can make up that 50,000 difference? And Ben, I think it's your turn, actually, on this list here.
I didn't bring my PowerPoint slides. So I'll step back rather than start in the weeds and take a big picture look at where we are in this race. And I think it takes three things to win, for a Democrat to win in the 5th District. I think it takes the right candidate, I think it takes a blue wave, and I think it takes a weak incumbent. And I think we have the third one. I think we have a weak incumbent. You guys have all been paying attention to Tom Garrett. I'm sure many of you have tried to get in touch with him and been unsuccessful. Tom Garrett's given us a lot of material to work with. You know, let's just take his 2017 as an example. He started the year by voting to repeal the Affordable Care Act and rip health care away from 23 million Americans without replacing it. He ended the year by voting for this disastrous tax reform, cut, plan, shenanigans, call it whatever you want, with Donald Trump. And in the middle of the year, he had a meeting in his congressional office with neo-Nazis and white supremacists who organized the Charlottesville rally. So, his body of work has given us ample opportunities to take him on. That's the third thing. The second thing is a blue wave. I think we might have a blue wave. And, you know, I think if you look at what happened in 2017, you look at the energy that we are seeing on the ground everywhere we go, and I think we've got a blue wave. We were in Martinsville, Henry County for their party meeting a couple weeks ago. There were, 40 people in the room for their Democratic committee meeting. You asked the chair there how many people they'd had at their average meeting 2 years ago? 8 to 10. So the energy you see in this room, we are seeing across the entire district, and that should make us all excited. The third thing, I think, is the right candidate. I think to beat Tom Garrett, we've got to have somebody with a little bit of Teflon on him. I think that we've got to have somebody who can withstand the inevitable attacks, the inevitable Republican attacks that we know are coming. Whether we like them or not, we know they're coming. And we've got to have somebody who can withstand those. And that's why I talk so much about my local roots. That's why I talk about my grandfather being from, working across Southside and Southwest Virginia, why I talk about taking family vacations to Smith Mountain Lake and Lake Gaston, why I talk about the fact that I've created jobs across the entire district. Because I think when Tom Garrett comes at me and starts spewing all sorts of nonsense, I can turn it back around on him. Say, Tom Garrett, I've been working to make this community better my entire life. What have you done for this community? And I think the answer is ripped healthcare away from people, met with neo-Nazis, and voted for this disastrous tax bill. So those three things, that's not numbers, but that is the strategy. Right candidate, blue wave, weak incumbent. All three of those things, I think we win in 2018.
Leslie.
I just want to mention first a couple of things that have come up here. First of all, the government, thank you. The new budget has allowed the government to study gun violence, so that is no longer an issue. The other thing is that on gun violence, I feel very strongly about actually adding my name to the assault weapons ban that is now in the House of Representatives, which includes getting rid of bump stocks and high-capacity magazines. And even though I grew up in a hunting household, as an adult, I spent a great deal of time in war zones, and I have seen weapons of war used in ways that we do not want them here. So just making that distinction between a hunting weapon and a weapon of war is critical. In terms of this campaign, there is no question that there is huge excitement in this district. We've had standing room only meet and greets in counties where people just have never come out. In Lunenburg, in Brunswick, in Mecklenburg, and people are there, they're energized, they're asking really great questions. This is a very different year. And I think that Tom Garrett is very vulnerable, as everybody in this room knows. And it's also, for me and my campaign, it is a great year for women. We have now an army of volunteers, and they are women, and they are angry, and they're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. So that is an important piece. Everyone, I think, has their own constituencies, but that's really important because that's where there's a huge amount of effort and capacity out there among women. And actually, someone said to me, well, I don't know if a woman can win this race. And I say, well, let's look at the statistics. 17 men have failed to take this seat. 2 women have failed. So 17 versus 2. Why is this more important? Clearly, this is tough for a Democrat, but it is now regarded as a swing district, and I believe it is a swing district. And I think that in terms of reaching all sorts of people, I am a progressive Democrat, but on social issues. So I care about women's choice, I care about minimum wage, I care about a lot of things, climate change, a lot of things that younger voters care about. But I also am a conservationist, and I find I am attracting Republicans. In Rappahannock, in Fauquier County, I had a meet and greet in Fauquier, and half the room were Republicans. And it's because in our boards of supervisors, as everyone knows, we have these battles between Republicans and Tea Party. And there are a lot of people who are tired of this, and they want some kind of sensible representation in Congress. And they don't like Tom Garrett. So people come across because they're tired of Tom. And that's a good phrase, tired of Tom. And so I think that combined with this notion of getting out the vote, that we do have 4,000 more Democrats, that affects, for example, African-American communities who came out for Obama, did not come out for Hillary. And those people, if you want to get people's vote, go ask them what they want and then deliver it. And if you do that, you will get their vote. There are so many communities here who feel that people don't come visit them, they don't care about what they really care about, so you have to spend time, build relationships, build field operations in the way Obama did it. That's the way we're doing it. We have, we've built an army in our campaign, and that can win.
Thank you. Artie.
Well, did y'all follow those election results in Pennsylvania with Connor Lamb? Yeah. That's right. That's our model right there. So Connor Lamb is a Marine veteran. He's a prosecutor. He fits his district. He was endorsed by something called Vote Vets. Vote Vets spent a lot of money on his behalf in that election, and that's one of the reasons that he won. And I am really proud to say that Vote Vets has endorsed my campaign. One of the things that happened to our great nominee last time, Jane Ditmar, is she got outspent by about $1 million the last 10 days of that campaign. And if I have anything to do with it, and if I'm your nominee, I don't think Vote Vets is going to let that happen. So then that's a big part of the success formula. I wish it weren't, but that you have to have those national groups that will get you back there towards the end of the election. I'm really proud they've endorsed my campaign. Our model here is what happened to Barack Obama and Tom Perriello in 2008. In 2008, Barack Obama lost this district by about 4.5 points, and that allowed Tom to perform about 4.5 points above him and carry the district. We're really fortunate to have Senator Kaine on the ballot in 2018, and so we just got to convince his team, hey, can Senator Kaine spend some time and money in the 5th District, get us to about 5 points right there, and then our job is to outperform Senator Kaine through door knocking and phone calls and personal relationships and spending more money here than he would do that. That's an important part of how we're going to win, and we try to talk to those folks as much as we can about making that happen. I am really proud that my campaign has raised $1 million. We announced that last week. And let me tell you a little bit about that $1 million, because there's a little bit of misinformation going on right there. Just want to correct the record. That's 4,000 individual contributions. The median donation to my campaign is $25. 80% of the donations to my campaign are less than $100. All 23 cities and counties in our district, all 50 states, we got a grassroots movement happening here. People want to see veterans beat people like Tom Garrett. And we're really proud of that. In addition to that, my campaign has made 125,000 phone calls. We're really proud of those efforts. We have 9 full-time field organizers. We're getting it done in the field, and we should have a really exciting announcement coming this week about where we are with that. So I think it takes all of those factors together, the right candidate that fits the district, Senator Kane performing at a certain percentage, and then the local nominee overperforming that, and then I think it takes grassroots resources to beat Tom Garrett. So that's my formula.
Artie, I want to continue this theme a little bit and ask you a specific question. We'll work our way down. And it's also, what kind of Democrat are you? Conor Lamb won 20%, 20 vote difference, discrepancy. Obviously, you would like to have Tim Kaine come in and campaign for you. Hypothetical. If Senator Elizabeth Warren offered to come in, or Joe Manchin offered to come in, and you could only take one of them, which one would you choose?
Joe Manchin, no question. Joe Manchin's favorability in this district is going to be way higher than Elizabeth Warren's is.
Okay. That's enough.
I just want to say one more sentence. Progressivism depends on progress, and progress depends on your district. The most progressive thing I'm going to do in my entire life is beat Tom Garrett this fall with your help. And please don't forget that.
Leslie, same choice.
I think you know the answer. It would be Elizabeth Warren. I will say, though, that we too are raising a ton of money, and we've got not quite as many donors as RD, but close. And I think that we outraised everyone here last quarter, including Tom Garrett, and the average donation, 56% were $100 or less. So that's a very good sign. So we too have a grassroots movement.
Ben, your choice, Elizabeth or Joe?
You would think that after going third, I'd have had a chance to think about it. So enamored with what these guys were saying, I wasn't thinking. I'm going to go with Senator Manchin from West Virginia. I have immense amount of respect for both of them, but I think one of the things that he has done very successfully is navigated a particularly diverse constituency. When you think about the state of West Virginia and the income disparity that they have, the racial challenges that they have there, the challenges they have with opioid crisis, he has navigated a very difficult set of issues in a state that looks more similar to the 5th District of Virginia than Massachusetts does.
All right, I'm going to be unfair and ask a similar question in a different way. Ben, if elected, your first decision you will probably have to make would be whether to support Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House or head of leadership, depending on whether they win or not, or a, quote, newcomer, younger generation, Joe Crowley, whomever. How would you think about that? I'm not sure you even have to answer, but how would you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good...
First thing you're going to do when you're there, you got to make that choice.
Yeah, I think that's one of these questions where the national media sort of presents us with this sort of binary thing, right? They say, this is a yes or a no question. I think ultimately when we get there, we get to a point where there are certain people in front of us and we say, okay, who's running? And you make a decision. I think, though, that how I think about the issue is that you can say two things at the same time and hold them both in your head. We are Democrats, and we are smart, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think you can say that Nancy Pelosi has accomplished an incredible amount as the leader of our party. She has done an incredible thing. She got the Affordable Care Act passed. She got all sorts of things through the House of Representatives. So you can hold her up, you can elevate her, and you can respect what she has done, and you can thoughtfully analyze whether or not it's time for new leadership in our party. I think we as Democrats can do that. I think that we can make this more than a binary choice as we go into this election and as we go into actually making that decision next January.
Leslie.
I think Nancy Pelosi has been vilified by the Republicans. Why are they scared of Nancy Pelosi? She's the most powerful woman in America. She is a negotiator of great skill, and she can raise money like no one else can. So the Republicans have set the agenda. They said, oh, well, you can't mention Nancy Pelosi in your campaign. You have to, and I see the Democrats running scared. They're Democrats. You saw it in Pennsylvania. He wouldn't mention Nancy Pelosi or come out for Nancy Pelosi. I think that I don't like seeing scared Democrats. I think we need to take back the language. We need to take back the rhetoric, and we have to understand why they attack Nancy Pelosi. They attack her because she's effective. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother. So in terms of supporting her, I don't know how things are going to look in this coming fall when I come in, but I do think that I have tremendous respect for her. I know her, and I know that this woman is a leader, and I really see why the Republicans are so scared of her. I just wish the Democrats wouldn't be so scared to embrace her as the leader of the party. I think that it's a bit sad.
Well, let me just be the first to say, I will work with an alien if they help me job creation here in the 5th District of Virginia, okay? I do not care. I really struggle with judging a person by their zip code. You know, if someone judges Mama Sue, who's the 88-year-old Republican who lives in Lincoln County, North Carolina, because she's from there, I don't want people judging Nancy Pelosi by her zip code either. I don't like that. I think we ought to be a little bigger than that and a little more informed than that. When the person calls me and says, hey, RD, I need your support so I can be the leader of the Democratic Party, I'm going to say, okay, well, here's my list. I need to be on the Intelligence Committee because that's important to keep people safe, and it's something I know about. And also, we have an Army Intelligence Center here in our district. We need to get an opioids bill through the House of Representatives because it's an issue that's personally affected my family, and people are suffering. And I'm going to say we need rural broadband in my district right now. When FDR signed in 1936 the Rural Electrification Act, it changed our country because everybody could participate. Everybody could be more equal. And if that person says, hey, we can probably get those three things done, they're going to have my attention. And if they don't, they're not. It's just that simple.
Let's continue on that. Ben, you're elected. Congratulations. What committees would you like to get on, and why, and how would that actually help the 5th District of Virginia?
So, committee assignments, I think first in this district, we have got to have somebody on the Agriculture Committee. Largest largest in terms of sheer numbers, jobs in Southside Virginia. Also a lot of opportunity for the future if we do things right. I'd like to be on the Health Committee, Health, Education, Labor, Pension. And then lastly, I want to be on Ways and Means. Look.
Tell Nancy Pelosi that.
You asked what I want. And I want to be on Ways and Means because that's where the power flows through in the House of Representatives. And ultimately, I think we want to aim as high as possible. We want to get as much as we can here for the 5th District of Virginia. And so, hey, look, we're gonna have a blue wave. We're gonna have a lot of new people elected, and that's gonna be what I'm looking for.
Leslie, if I ask you this, I've lost track.
There you have it.
You haven't. It's yours. It's your turn, I think. It's all yours.
Thank you. Well, the first committee I'd like to be on is the House Oversight Committee. It has a health subcommittee, and I would like to bring Big Pharma up to Capitol Hill to answer some questions about drug prices and about being opioid pushers. So that would be my greatest delight in Congress. And with my background as an investigative journalist, I think we could do a great job with that. I'd also like to be on natural resources on one of the subcommittees because several of them affect the environment in the 5th District. And they also, one committee touches on national parks, and I really want to reverse this egregious decision to up the price of going to the Shenandoah National Park to $70 per car, which is wrong and is very bad for our county. So I would also be interested in, we don't get to really choose as freshmen unless there's a nice big vacancy. The Agriculture Committee has a particular subcommittee that deals with poultry, cattle, and exports. So I think all of that would be useful because the exports, we have a lot of timber exports too. We're exporting a huge amount to China, which will be affected by these tariffs. So Agriculture Committee and, you know, depending on what you can get, the other good committee for this district is T&I, it's Transportation and Infrastructure, because our transportation is appalling. There are some counties like Brunswick when I asked where's the bus stop and they said an hour and a half away in Richmond. So transportation and infrastructure, we have a huge amount to do in the district for infrastructure.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question. And then we're going to open up to questions. What? I'm sorry. You're jumping ahead.
All right. Thanks, Dean. Appreciate y'all getting my back up there.
That's right.
Well, I already mentioned the Intelligence Committee, and let me tell you why that's important to me. I did learn a little bit about how distributed computing works, and the idea behind distributed computing is basically, and everywhere in the world right now, you can hit a button and you can have a computer do anything you want it to do. That power is an awesome power, but I think we got to be careful about just fully deploying that by the federal government. And I want to be a part of an effort to make sure Americans have a little bit more understanding about what's going on behind the scenes and also help keep us safe. And I think my Marine Corps experience and my experience in technology could really be a force for good on that committee, and that's really important for me to do my part. And as I mentioned, we also have an Army Intelligence Center just outside of Charlottesville. It is outside of the blast radius of D.C., which is a little bit sort of morbid to talk about, but it's very strategically placed for our national security interests. And I'd love to be a part of making that center better to make sure we're accomplishing that mission. So I think the Intelligence Committee is really important to me, and I think it can make a difference in the 5th District. The other committees I've been on have sort of already been mentioned, but I'll mention them briefly. Agriculture is the top industry still here in Virginia. That's an important committee for us to be on if we could possibly get on it. And I think health, education, labor pensions for Democrats. Obviously, with the University of Virginia and other community colleges here in the 5th District, institutions like Averett, down in Danville, we need someone who can help be that convener-in-chief for our private sector and our institutions of higher learning. A lot of our institutions have sort of gotten off track over the last 20 years, and I talked about this a little bit earlier with our discussion about the economy. And one of the ways where we can help nudge them in the right direction is making sure that they're focusing more on skills and not just degrees. Now, I have a liberal arts education. I have a chemistry degree that I've never used. And, you know, what we need to make sure is especially our community colleges can jump in and make sure people are getting skills. And I think the Education Committee on Help could be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, one last question, and then I'm going to open up the audience. So start thinking about what you want to ask. I feel like I'm going to be Barbara Walters with this question. This generation knows who she is. So you're down the South Side, pick a town, Danville, down and out. Things are pretty crappy. You're in some luncheonette, you're talking to a bunch of people. What's the best sort of question you got or the best experience? And I don't mean someone saying, oh, I need health care. I need this. I don't mean an issue related. I mean, what did you hear from somebody that actually impact the way you see this race and the way you're running it? And you're next, first.
I'm going to share something personal now. Everything wasn't always easy for the Huffstetlers growing up. My parents struggled with substance abuse, and my dad actually passed away from an Oxycontin overdose. And I have struggled at times on how much to share about that, whether to mention it at all. But the first time I mentioned it was in a room of about 20 people. And not 2 minutes later, one of our fellow Virginians said, "My dad died of an Oxycontin overdose too." And I ended up chatting with her extensively about her experiences. And, you know, moments like that on the campaign can be quite rewarding when you realize that everybody suffers in this country at some point, and what keeps us in common is more important than what divides us. And we talked a bit about how some folks in her family weren't able to get the treatment that they needed, and why it's important we have fully funded treatment programs. And yes, there was an aspect of public policy that was discussed, but now every time I see this person, that's what we talk about. How's so-and-so doing? How's it going? How's the fight? How are you hanging in there? And for me, that was one of the highlights of the campaign, to be honest with you, because I felt a real personal connection. And, when something like that happens to you, you're not sure how to deal with it. You're not sure how to talk about it. But probably the most important lesson I learned from my dad passing away suddenly was, life's not what happens to you. Life's about what you do about what happens to you. Thank you.
Leslie.
Well, I've mentioned people talking really a lot about their personal health care problems. But another issue that you run into, that certainly I do, is the issue of racial justice. Given what happened August 12th last year in the district, a Pandora's box has been opened, and we are now on the front line of the Trump wars here. And people really feel it. In African American communities, people are very conscious that we have a bit of a new civil rights struggle going on. I was with a woman not long ago, Joy Speaks, who was one of the students who walked out of the Moton High School in 1951 in Prince Edward County that began desegregation in America. She said, that was a long time ago, but I'm seeing it again. And I hear it again and again. So as part of my campaign, I want to address two things which are institutional racism. One is we have a terrible problem in Virginia with school-to-prison pipeline, with kids who absolutely fall through the cracks, who don't get the special education they need, who don't get the counselors they need, and suddenly they're ending up in jail rather than in college. We need to address it, and we can address it. It's a financial issue with the schools. The schools are starved. Let's fire Betsy DeVos for starters. And fortunately, in the new budget, they absolutely rejected her demands for cuts, and they put more into Head Start and more into counselors, so that's very good. But this racial justice issue goes into other areas too, and that is we have terrible prisons here. We are part of the problem of, as you know, there are 2.2 million prisoners now in American jails. We need to fix this problem. We need to, and the conditions are not good. There is a women's prison in Fluvanna where women are not getting the health care they need, and women who have had cancer have literally had tumors growing out of their bodies before anyone sees them. People are dying in jail. We need to address the criminal justice system, and there are a lot of people in this district who have a relative in jail. Really a lot of people. So let's think about those students, and let's respond to what happened last August with a positive, forward-moving push for racial justice.
Ben.
One of the things that I'm most proud about in this campaign is the way that we are engaging young people in a way that they've not been engaged before. And I am proud. This morning we were up in Washington at the march, Washington D.C. at the march, and as you walk around and you see these young people and their adult allies who are supporting them, you have to be excited about the future of our country. Yes, things are tough. Yes, Donald Trump is our president. Yes. But you cannot help but be inspired by the young folks who are organizing these rallies and who are leading our country right now on the issue of gun violence. And these are the types of people that we're engaging in our campaign. We're engaging high schoolers, community college students, four-year college students. These are people that are getting involved. You know, I was talking with a supporter in Danville who's in his 30s. He and his wife, they're very engaged in our campaign. And I finally just said to him, you know, you haven't even voted in a lot of other elections. Like, why are you here? And he said, it's because we finally got a candidate who looks like me, is my age, and talks about issues that are important to me. You know, my father-in-law has a saying, you guys have probably heard this before, the definition of insanity is doing something the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It is time for a wholesale change in leadership in Washington. The folks who are there have had their chance, they have failed us, and it is time that we throw the bums out. So I am very proud to have engaged this new group, to be engaging this new group of people, because I think that it is harnessing the energy that we need to build the next generation of political leaders here.
We're going to go to questions, but I think here are three extraordinary candidates. How about applause? Okay, do I have some questions? And I think we've got a mic here. Or you just yell, Judy DeSarno, you don't need a mic, God love you.
So I don't know the group that endorsed you, RD, that was leader in funding in the 10th district. But that candidate, and I'm very glad he was elected, ran as an anti-Pelosi, anti-choice candidate. Do you endorse those same, and is that what this group is about?
No, ma'am, that is not what the group is about. The group is about getting a group of progressive veterans into politics and getting them onto Capitol Hill so we can get the country moving again. Connor Lamb described himself as personally pro-life, but public policy pro-choice. I want to mention that that is exactly the same way that Tim Kaine describes himself. So I think that I wouldn't exactly necessarily use the exact words you did, Jody. I'm not saying you're wrong, but for me, the way I process Connor Lamb is exactly how I process Tim Kaine. He's personally opposed to abortion, but that should have no impact on his voting. That's the way he's described himself. I think Connor Lamb presented himself as a person who fits his district. And Vote Vets was there to get his back, and I'm hoping that will happen in my campaign too, but I think it's a great question, Judy.
And so your position on the women's right to choose?
Oh, so I'm happy to talk about this one. My wife, Emily, is an OBGYN. And the Huffstetler household, we talk about women's health every day of our life. And it might be an extra chart she had to do, or an extra procedure she had to do, or something like that. And Emily has taught me a lot about this issue. And I will not, under any circumstances, let politicians from distant capitals get between a woman and her doctor. That is absolutely absurd. We wouldn't even be considering this if it was a man. And so I am firmly in the pro-choice camp. Yes, sir.
Other question. Or Judy, would you like either of you want to address that question?
Sure. I would love to know everybody's position on it.
I would like to remind people that we're hearing now in the press, Pennsylvania, this is the model. We also have Alabama, and we had a whole different group of people who were active there. In fact, we had a whole group of extraordinary African-American women. They pushed that through, and it's a different campaign. So we're seeing wins with different sets of people and ideas in the Democratic Party. You do not have to be a conservative Democrat to win. And in fact, many counties here were Bernie counties. So.
Thank you. Ed?
One nice thing about being on stage with a lot of Democrats is we often find ourselves agreeing on things, and this is a particular place where we find a lot of agreement. I don't feel the need to take time from other questioners to say I'm also pro-choice.
Okay, have another question. Yes, right.
Thank you very much for being here. My question is you're in Rappahannock right now. What are our issues that we are looking at, and how are you going to address those? What do you see as our issues as our county? Not down south, not in Charlottesville, but here in Rappahannock.
You're home, I mean.
You know the answer, they get to think.
They get to think. Okay. There are key things that involve Rappahannock that we have to be thinking about. First of all, I should say There are wonderful people up on Capitol Hill. We simply have to add more Democrats to flip the House. It is not a swamp as far as Democrats go. In fact, my campaign has now received the support of John Lewis, the great civil rights leader. This is very important to me. There are a whole group of Democrats like John who believe in things like the Medicare for All, like supporting the current assault weapons ban, and I would go with that group. Okay, where was I? Oh, Rappahannock. Okay, Rappahannock. Rappahannock, first of all the agriculture issues. Trump has really showed that he couldn't care less about farmers. And with the tax bill, for example, you know it's going to cause auto cuts for Medicare and Medicaid. It's also going to cause auto cuts for several farm programs. I think Rappahannock, like other counties with the kind of agriculture that takes place here, we need to make sure that we have enough money in the farm bill for conservation issues. We have issues of immigrants and immigrant labor that's important. We have very important school issues, children's issues. We have opioid issues. All of the things that we're talking about hit Rappahannock. And in terms of that tax bill, it even affects volunteer fire department emergency services. So everything that's going on now on the Hill is affecting us here.
Ben.
Certainly, that's a good list. The things that I want to spend time working on, thinking on, that affect the entire district, but specifically Rappahannock County. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about education and how we bring education funding to places like this county. I think one of the big challenges with education at a federal level, and I want to elaborate on this, is that the federal government gets accused all the time of, and this is an old saying from my grandfather, was they send the rabbit, but they don't send the carrot. And has been historically a big challenge in education. And so we can rethink this a little bit. I think one of the ways to do that is by thinking about education and our schools as infrastructure. We think about infrastructure all the time as roads, bridges, airports, broadband, and that is true infrastructure. But one way that we can pull some of the challenges that local communities have and put them into the federal budget is by thinking about our physical schools as infrastructure. In the federal infrastructure bill that can help renovate schools, build new schools, add career and technical education centers. That's one thing that we can do that I think would be helpful. Obviously, too, we've got to have a congressperson who's willing to lead on the issues of racial justice. And I think that means a couple of things. I think first thing that means is that we've got to have somebody who understands these issues. I also think it means we've got to have a congressperson who's willing to stand up. I mean, obviously, in Rappahannock County, you guys we have seen what it looks like when the KKK comes knocking. So we need a congressperson who's willing to stand up and say, I'll fight for a new Voting Rights Act. I'll fight for proper oversight for the Jeff Sessions Department of Justice. I'll fight for restoration of voter rights for felonies who served their time. And those are issues that impact the entire district, but specifically Rappahannock. And obviously, we've got to be really good on the issue of the environment, on the issue of conservation. It is a given, and it's something that you can be sure that when I am your representative, be in the front of my mind as we're working on issues and bills that affect this part of the world.
Artie,
Yes, sir.
I'll forget you this time.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit earlier about how the jobs plan works from my perspective, and I think one of the biggest things we can do is help facilitate some better interaction between Patrick Henry Community College campus over in Warrenton and the folks here from Rappahannock, so that we're meeting that demand with hospitality, ecotourism, and things like that. That'd be a big driver of the economy. The second thing is, listen, I've already talked about broadband as well. We cannot have our school children in rural communities have a different access to the changing economy than other folks in the country. And we don't want kids going to the local library just so they can do their homework. And I think I've already mentioned that's going to be one of the first things I ask from the person who wants to be the Democratic leader about how we're going to treat people equally in this country is make sure they have equal access to the internet.
Other question, I see it, yes, there we go.
At the risk of being a traitor to our gender, I think enough white men are in power. We need a woman, or at least a voice with the most contrast to the toxicity of the Trump ethos. How do you think you can get in touch with your feminine side?
I'll go first. It's a great question. I think, being married to an OBGYN is a big answer to this problem. I really do. And it really helps me understand a lot of different issues. And, when the Republicans were going to vote on that 20-week ban for abortion, I went to Emily and I said, tell me about this. And she said, well, look, folks come to the doc then, and they get an ultrasound at that period of the pregnancy. And, you can have some unfortunate results there. And I think what's happening with Republicans continue to push those restrictions, I think that it makes it harder for women to make the right healthcare decisions. I think that's probably the issue that I'm, most comfortable chatting about. Listen, I've also spoken up about ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment. I always say, what do Texas, West Virginia, and Kentucky have in common? They voted for Donald Trump, and they have ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. So the fact that Virginia has not done this, they need to fix that. They need to ratify it in the Senate right away. That's a big deal, and we need to make sure that gets taken care of. One of my core values are duty, empathy, and commitment. And I have written about them on my website. And I will tell you that I often say, I can never know what it feels like to be another human being. And obviously, I can't know what it feels like to process the world and be here as a woman. And Leslie is an excellent example of someone who has been fighting in the trenches in a male-dominated profession. And she set an excellent example. I don't think there's any question about that. But all I can do is try to understand, try to dig deeper and say, what was that like? How can I make that easier? How can I promote women on my team so they can have a higher leadership role? And that's what you can count on me to do. Alice Sue Huffstetler was born 6 weeks ago. I want her to do anything she wants in this country. And that's important to me. So thank you.
I'm in touch with my feminine side. I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 4, and I certainly think a lot about the issue of choice and my daughters and my granddaughters and how they will be affected by this. We need to make sure that Planned Parenthood stays open. We need to make sure that people get free contraception so that we will have fewer unwanted pregnancies. As clearly as we saw the unwanted pregnancy numbers drop dramatically, we know that the Affordable Care Act and giving women the health care they need really, really helps. There are some other issues that being in touch with my feminine side, I really see. One is that a big piece of the gun issue is domestic violence. If we make sure that we close those loopholes on domestic violence, we will not have terrible situations like a man going into a church in Texas. It was known that he was a domestic violence offender, and every town has done statistics showing over 50% of these massacres are caused by people guilty of domestic violence. So that needs to be changed. Also things, for example, with sexual assault, now that we're all thinking Me Too. In the military, women, a third of women who go into the military are assaulted sexually in the military. This is way too high. These are extremely dedicated people. We need to protect these women, and we do that by making sure that when they're judged, it's by someone outside of their chain of command. So I would get together with the other women in the House who are already thinking about this and push very hard for that kind of legislation.
Look, if your criteria for who should be your next congressperson is that it's a woman, then I'm very clearly not the man for the job. If you are looking for someone to be a check, to the second point of your question, if you are looking for someone to be a check on Donald Trump, I certainly fit that criteria. I will be check on Donald Trump's Department of Education, his Department of Justice, his disastrous foreign policy, his Environmental Protection Agency. I can be that check on Donald Trump. Now, the last thing I'll say is I make a point to surround myself with strong women. This is not something I shy away from. My generation is different on this issue. And this is a place where we are used to and we have expectations for equality. That's not to say my generation is perfect, but we are a little bit different. When we are hiring people, we look to make sure that we are giving women equal consideration. We look in education to make sure that women are being promoted through our school systems equally. We look in business to make sure that the same thing is happening. So this is a place where you can absolutely trust me on this issue, and I will fight like the Dickens for women on my team and to ensure that we are pushing back against Donald Trump in every aspect of this administration.
Yes. You may have asked this earlier, John, and I got here a little late. So my question is, and I have a little recommendation is, will the losers of this process for the candidate for Democratic Party taking on Mr. Garrett enthusiastically support the winner?
And may I amend that because he stole my question? There's something going on here. Be as specific and concrete as you can about that. That was going to be my question.
The answer is yes. We're calling it the Perriello Pledge. Tom put up a good fight against Ralph last year, 2017. Fair victory on Ralph's part, and Tom worked every day for the rest of the campaign to make sure that Ralph Northam got elected, Justin Fairfax got elected, and Mark Herring got elected. You have my pledge that I'll do the exact same thing for any of the three other candidates who are running. Now, what that looks like, defer to that person. You want me to write a check, I'll write a check. You want me to knock doors, I'll knock doors. You make phone calls, I'll make phone calls. I put myself at the service of the eventual nominee.
Yes, we've all pledged to do that, and we've also all pledged to run a campaign that's not like the Republicans. We've pledged not to engage in innuendo, slander, all of the things that any one of us would face with Tom Garrett, which is good. In terms of what I would do for the candidate, I would do exactly what I did for Ralph Northam. I will go to every hollow in Rappahannock and knock on doors. And also, I campaigned for 3 people who were seeking the job at House of Delegates. So I did that in Rappahannock, Madison, and Franklin. So I would be very active, yes, in support of the Democratic nominee.
Yes, 100%. The mission of everybody here on stage is to make sure that Tom Garrett is a one-term congressman. I wish we could do it as a team. We would definitely win. But this is the process that our government uses, and we spend a lot of time together. And I will tell you, you learn a lot about these great folks. And I've mentioned this before, but one morning we were at a little meet and greet, and I learned that Leslie was a swimmer, and my wife was a swimmer, and it's great when you learn small things like that make a difference. And of course, Ben is really fond of telling everybody, I can't believe I'm stealing his thunder, but the first person he saw in the world was Vito Perriello, who delivered him at the Martha Jefferson Hospital. In fact. Yeah, very true. And so listen, I'll do everything I can for the nominee. We'll try to help them on the finance front. We'll try to help them on the ground front. We'll try to make their case. We've developed an economic development plan that, if I'm not the nominee, please someone take it and create jobs here. And so those are the things that we would like to do to be helpful.
So I had a recommendation, and that is, I actually did work on the Hill at one point in my life, and I still engage with the Hill on a daily basis. I didn't hear anybody say that they wanted to be a member of the Appropriations Committee, and the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, does not have any Democrat on the House Appropriations Committee. And if you think about what happens in terms of legislation that the House may start, lots of things get get started but never get done in the Senate. But if you look at what was in the omnibus bill that was just passed yesterday, or signed yesterday, there's a lot that a member of the Appropriations Committee can do that you can't do as an authorizer. So I would recommend that you at least consider seeking a seat on the House Appropriations Committee.
Good suggestion.
How about, yes.
Well, aren't they gonna talk about it? What is that?
Oh, it's a great idea. Yeah.
If a
Yeah,
freshman
well-
can do it, great.
Yeah,
I'm on Ways and Means.
we haven't heard much tonight about international affairs, so I'm gonna ask a nice broad question that'll give you lots of leeway, all for you guys to answer. And the question is the United States of America still the leader of the free world? If so, why? If not, why not? And what would you do to change this?
You've gone from appropriations and Ways and Means to controlling the world.
William Henry Huffstetler was part of the radio battalion that landed at D-Day, my grandfather. And he and his generation, the greatest generation, were able to free a continent and destroy an evil ideology that set up America as the beacon of hope for the entire world. And we've been fortunate, generation upon generation, to hand that to each other and say, you know what, this is our job. When things aren't going well in other places, America steps up. We're that city on a hill. We shine our values to everywhere in the planet. There is nothing more disturbing about the Trump administration than the fact that that's at risk right now. His election, his rhetoric, his divisiveness, his rejection of the idea that Americans should be that beacon to the whole world is a threat, not just to the world, but to us, so that we forget who we are in this process. And we can't allow that to happen. We have to continue to talk about our country as the place we're building together where everyone is included. And that's what really drives me in this campaign. And that's just not just domestic policy, that's foreign policy as well. And I was fortunate to serve overseas, and for me, having these other countries participate in democracy is a thrill. It is fantastic that America was able to bring that thinking into different nooks and crannies around the planet. And I want to still be that country that people look to for the example of how we can treat people fairly, about how we can make sure everyone's included in the future. And so, yes, it is at risk, but that's why we're doing this, so we can change that and get our country back on track.
Well, my grandfather earned his Silver Star as a Marine in World War I. He crossed the front line and cleaned out a sniper's nest, which was an extremely dangerous thing to do to protect the men in his company. He was gassed. He saw some of the worst fighting in World War I, and that was pretty bad. My father was an Army officer in World War II. Everybody in my family believes in service. I think that part of the reason why I spent 35 years as a journalist was because I believe in not only defending truth, but in giving voice to the voiceless and holding people accountable. So I have been in many wars. I was in 3 Afghan wars, 2 Iraqi wars. I was in Somalia, Cambodia, Colombia, Central America, Haiti, etc., etc. What I see is that our foreign policy can get off course very, very easily. It has, for example, in Iraq. We know that we went into that war with a promise that we were getting rid of weapons of mass destruction, and there were no weapons of mass destruction. The human cost was truly terrible of that war, not to mention the fact that we are paying trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan. John Bolton has just been given the big job at the White House. John Bolton wants to go to war in Iran. This is a very, very dangerous time. And it's important that if you send someone to Capitol Hill, that that person has experience with these things, whether it be understanding Iran or understanding North Korea, some experience, seeing in great detail what U.S. foreign policy can do. We need to keep on the right course. Our position in the world is being eroded very, very, very fast. There are many people in the rest of the world who think we're actually insane. It's true, and I mean it on every level, whether it's the Paris Accord with climate change, whether it's this outrageous display of putting us all in danger of nuclear war with Trump's behavior in North Korea. And we're going to be seeing it again now with John Bolton and his desires and what he's going to want to do with Iran. Some very, very wise and careful people put together that Iran deal. We need to preserve it. And we're going into uncharted territory. We need people fast up on the Hill who can deal with some of these issues. Thank you.
I do believe that America is still the leader of the free world, but let's be honest, we all have our concerns about the fact that Donald Trump is the guy at the helm. And so this makes this time in our history so important, that the Congress take back the proper declaration of war. The AUMFs have, we are using old AUMFs for all of our engagements overseas. And I understand how this came to be. Congress people were scared. They didn't want to vote on issues of war and peace because they knew if a war went poorly, that they would be told that soldiers' bodies coming home, they would be criticized for that. And so the Congress ceded the power to the executive branch to effectively administer wars. And I think it's time, we're seeing that now with Donald Trump in charge, that Congress needs to take this back. And we are lucky in Virginia. We have the leader in the House, in the entire Congress, the House or the Senate, we have the leader working on this issue, and that's Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine is making it one of the most important pieces of his legislative portfolio to make sure that we begin declaring war properly again. And I believe if the House of Representatives and the Senate take back this power, that it will dramatically change our foreign policy. Because the president won't have the ability to just send troops here, send troops there, in a way that the president has had for the past 2 decades. Let's be honest, we were all okay with it when Barack Obama was the one doing it. And it wasn't right then, it isn't right now. And this is one of the biggest issues from a foreign affairs perspective that we're going to need to make sure we're working on over the course of the next couple of years.
Sharon, if it can be kind of a quickly answered question. Only because of time.
That last thing, the only way to get control of that kind of thing away from the president and back into Congress is not to fund the military that he wants to send all over those places. And that takes a lot of guts because you'll be accused of undermining our servicemen. But the Congress has the right not to fund this, and that's the only way you're going to get the control back. So if you want to comment, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'll make a comment. I do not support that. I will never support not funding our troops because of a decision that another politician made wrong. The job here is for Senator Kaine and the others in the Congress to take charge of this authorization of military force and redefine the mission in a way that we can declare victory. So, Sharon, I know you're passionate about it, but I just want to say I do not support that. Thank you.
All right. I think we've come to the end of questions. I'm going to ask each of these candidates, you probably are tired of talking, but to give them one last, 3 or 4 minutes of why the hell you ought to be elected. But before that, let me just mention, as most of you know in this room probably, the caucus for Rappahannock is Saturday, April 14th. The Washington School starts at 9:30, so if you want to follow through on what you've learned here today, that's the place to go. All right, let's just do the, how do I ask you to do the impassioned, emotional, and not canned finishing talk about why you should be elected? And RD, start with Leslie. RD, let's go with you. Reverse how the opening was.
Sure. Well, I'd just like to tell you a quick story about why I still believe in America and what my hope is for every family in our country. I was a Marine, and I got trained at Parris Island, South Carolina. It is 13 weeks of training. It is not fun, but it was a good experience. There are 70 training days at Parris Island. At training day 62, you go to something called the confidence course. You're not supposed to go with confidence, but you're supposed to leave with confidence. That's the idea. And there's about 10 or 12 obstacles or something like that. And there's a particular obstacle called the A-frame. You go up a rope, you run across some logs, and you jump through an A and grab another rope and you go down. Well, 62 days in, you're pretty sure you're going to make it. Okay, you're not there yet, but you're pretty sure. And I get to the A-frame, and there's a recruit up there. We're going to call him Recruit Smith. And Recruit Smith is terrified of heights. Okay, I mean, as scared as you can possibly be. And he is grabbing the A for dear life, and he is not letting go. And the drill instructor's up there, and he says, he's providing him some encouragement. Recruit Smith, get off my obstacle. I'm going to rip your head off, Recruit Smith, that kind of, you know how this, you've seen Full Metal Jacket, you know the whole deal. And so about this time, I'm going up the rope. And I think, okay, at least I'm not Recruit Smith. This could be a lot worse. And then I'm running across the logs, and I see that rope through the A, and I'm about to grab it. And about this time, Senior Drill Instructor Gunner Sergeant Lunsford, to the top of his lungs, so that everybody on Parris Island can hear it, says, "Well, Smith, there goes Huffstetler. If Huffstetler can do it, literally anybody can do it." But you know, that drill instructor was right. And not just about Parris Island. He was right, because a Huffstetler wasn't even supposed to graduate from college. But a great Democratic governor in Georgia campaigned for and signed the Hope Scholarship. 1.8 million students in the state of Georgia have gone to school because of that, including me, as the first in my family to graduate from college. A Huffstetler was not supposed to go to Harvard, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the GI Bill, and Senator Jim Webb fixed it many years later, and I got to use it to go to that great institution as the first in my family to graduate from college. A Huffstetler was not supposed to work in technology. To my knowledge, my dad never got on an airplane. And yet I was able to go there and understand how this new changing economy works. And what I want for every family in our district, in our state, and in our country is that they can feel about America the way that I do, which is that when I worked hard and I followed the rules, my country had my back. And until that's true for every zip code, for every person whose color of skin is different from mine, or the color of the collar is different, we're going to keep fighting. And so I'm trying to get you to a cause, not just a campaign, a cause of treating people equally in our country again, a cause of investing in each other, a cause of getting each other's back. And I need your help. I need you to caucus with me. I need to be your nominee so we can make Tom Garrett a one-term congressman. Thank you.
Ben.
Politics in Washington right now, you guys know how this works. Let's look back to what happened after the Parkland shooting. After the Parkland shooting, CNN hosted a televised town hall for these high school students who had just gone through this mass shooting event, this traumatic event. It was an opportunity for them to question their elected leaders. And to me, this is exactly what democracy looks like. It looks like these courageous students asking difficult questions of their elected representatives and saying, how are you going to keep us safe? How are you going to help us? And they did that. But how did CNN cover this? Afterwards, CNN had their roundtable, and they analyzed the really hard-hitting issues, like who won and who lost, and who's up and who's down. That is what is wrong with Washington. And we need effective wholesale change to be able to fix that type of broken mentality. Because this is not about who's up and who's down. This is about solving problems for our community. After the shootings in Parkland, you know what we got from our Congressman Tom Garrett? We got silence, and we got retweeting conspiracy theories. I can guarantee you, if I'm your congressperson, there will be no silence, and there will be no retweeting of conspiracy theories. Now, what does success look like for me in this job? I want to tell you this so that in 2 years, when I come back and ask you for your vote, you can hold me to this. Success for me is not going to Washington to be on CNN or be on MSNBC. I'm not going to Washington to be on television. I'm going to Washington because I believe deeply that we can solve some of the big issues that are facing our district right now. I believe that we can expand access to affordable health care. I believe that we can create jobs, and I believe that we can improve our children's educational outcomes. I believe those things, and I want to work on them. And so success for me is not getting bogged down into who's tweeting what. I want to be able to say at the end of every week when I'm driving home, I want to be able to say, Ben, did you do something this week to give someone access to a better high-paying job or better health care or make sure a kid's school's better? And if I can answer those things at the end of every week, then I'll feel like I was successful in the job. I will work my fingers to the bone for you. Tom Garrett has barely broken a sweat. I think this comes down to who you can trust, and I believe that if you trust the local hometown guy, I'll go to Washington with your voices and your values, and I'll make you proud. Thank you.
This is a very critical time for our country. We are in danger right now of losing our democracy. This is not a normal year. It's not a normal time. We have a chance right now. 2018, this year, we have a chance to flip the House of Representatives. The Republicans expect us to do it, so let's not disappoint them. I got into this for a number of reasons, but the biggest was Donald Trump. He offended me as a woman. He alarmed me as a former journalist, that he would look out at his crowds and point to a journalist and say, "You are the enemy of the people." He crossed a line. He crossed a line by attacking the institution of the Fourth Estate. If we have no Fourth Estate, we have no democracy. And we are in danger. We must flip the House, and going up against Tom Garrett, we are going up against a mini Trump. The Republicans will likely, although they think he's a slacker, we know that now, but they will likely put a lot of resources into this fight. So whoever goes into the general has to be very tough. And it is a good thing to have experienced the Republicans in the past. I have gone up against them a number of times. When I was one of the people who broke the Iran-Contra story. And believe me, the pressure from the Republicans, from the Reagan administration was intense. They locked me out of every government agency. They tried to get me fired from CBS News, and they sued me, and I was 34 years old. I withstood all of that, and I know that this is the sort of thing that they could get up to again, and you have to be able to withstand it. It can be very, very difficult. We may have Coke money in here. We will certainly have dark money in here. So you have to be able to fight back. And I will tell you one thing about being a former producer at 60 Minutes and having this experience. You know how to do this stuff. And you know how to go up against, in debate, someone who is determined to lie, who is determined to take you off in a direction where you don't want to go and just haul him right back. And this is critical. You know, in my career, I've gone up against the Pentagon. When they were sending National Guardsmen on patrol around Baghdad, in Humvees with no armor on the bottom, they were called cardboard coffins. And I did that expose at 60 Minutes. I worked with the Guard. We exposed what was happening, and all of us got in trouble, but we made a difference. We made things happen. They started up-armoring those things. We saved lives. And a former Army colonel the other day jumped up in Franklin County and said, I was in Rumsfeld's office. And I remember when that happened and what a difference it made. When General Motors had people driving around in cars with the fuel tank in the wrong place and kids were burning up in the back seat, I worked for a year on that story. I went up against lawyers, rooms full of lawyers, but it was so important. Imagine if that happened to your family. When the big Wall Street banks were engaging in oil speculation, I discovered it because the oil prices were very, very high. Gas prices were so high, people were deciding whether or not to go to the movies. And everyone said, this is demand from China. But it wasn't demand from China. It was oil speculation, and we exposed it. Speaking truth to power is something we need now. And that's why I'm in this race. Thank you.
What an incredible array of candidates. You should all win. I have one last short question, and you can either say yes or no to my statement. My statement is that Rappahannock is the most unique and special and wonderful county in the 5th district. Yes, they all say yes. Thank you.